And welcome to the 12th annual Secular Humanist Society of New York Darwin Day dinner. My name is John Engel and I am the president of the Secular Humanist Society of New York. Damn straight. Charles Darwin, of course, was one of humankind's greatest scientists, and he and his legacy have led us all, well, most of us anyway, to an understanding of nature that is based on observation and reasonable analysis instead of superstition and blind belief. But I'll leave that to our distinguished speaker for tonight, who knows more about Darwin and his place in history than I ever will. So I want to introduce now our speaker tonight, Dr. Isabel Behncke. Isabel Behncke is a field ethologist who studies animal behavior to understand other animals, as well as to understand humans and our place in nature. Originally from Chile, she is an adventurer scientist, the first South American to follow great apes in the wild. She was trained at Oxford, Cambridge, and University College London in behavior, evolution, and ecology. For her PhD, Isabel walked more than 3,000 kilometers in the Congo jungle studying a community of wild bonobos. She worked at Wamba, the world's oldest bonobo research site, run by Japanese scientists from Kyoto University. Wars and social upheaval in the Congo meant that at the time of her study, Isabel was the first Western person in more than 20 years to do bonobo research at Wamba. Now, in contrast to their chimpanzee cousins, who are famous for their bellicose and often fatal intergroup encounters, Isabel observed extensive and peaceful interactions between bonobo communities. So chimpanzees are famous for their bellicose and fatal intergroup encounters, just like another group of primates that we all might be, unfortunately, knowledgeable about. Now, Isabel applies an evolutionary lens to derive insights into human behavior and the modern challenges faced by us humans and our planet. Her focus is studying play in non-human primates and has shed light on the role of play in our own development, since humans are one of the few species that play during adulthood. This is true. There's a guy in Washington right now playing at being leader of the free world, although whether or not he is an adult is open to some question. Now, Isabel often participates and co-leads expeditions to Patagonia, highlighting the role the place had in shaping the thinking of naturalists such as Darwin. In January 2017, how cool is this? She took a group of scientists, including Richard Dawkins, on board the world's only exact replica of the HMS Beagle, which is really absolutely amazing. Now, Isabel is also a TED Fellow, who, fortunately for us, enjoys public engagement with diverse global audiences. As a sought-after communicator, she does public speaking. For example, TED Main Event twice, Wired, United Nations HQ NYC, South by Southwest. She's done radio on NPR and BBC Radio 4, and participation in independent film and documentaries for Nat Geo, TVN, and the BBC, and often guest curates conferences and idea festivals in Europe and South America. In Chile, she is a public figure who has been conferred numerous prizes and awards for her contribution to science and for her role as a female leader. In 2011, she became the second person from her country, after the writer Isabel Allende, to deliver a TED Talk. Today, she is an associate professor at the Research Center for Social Complexity in Santiago, Chile, a senior fellow at the Grutter Institute for Research in Human Behavior in Institutions, and visiting researcher at Robin Dunford's Oxford University's Social Neuroscience Evolutionary Research Group, which has the wonderful acronym SNERG. She holds doctorate in evolutionary anthropology, master's in human evolution, master's in conservation, and bachelor's degree in zoology. And so, no more monkeying around from me. I don't want anybody going ape about me taking up too much time. So please join me in giving our undivided attention to our to our special guest this evening, Dr. Isabel Behncke.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. That's the most generous and lovely introduction. Can you hear me well? Well, it's such an honor, seriously, to be here tonight. Darwin Day is, of course, a momentous day for all of us, inquirers. And also Darwin Day, for me personally, has different layers of meaning, which I hope to make clear. It was difficult to pick a story to tell you tonight because there's so much to talk about when you're thinking secular. So I thought rather than lecture you to death on the specificities of bonobo societies, which I will give you, don't worry. I thought I'd just tell you about the process of science as discovery and as journey, which I think is, whether we're scientists or not, that really doesn't matter at all. It's got a kind of mind, a kind of framework of thinking that brings us all together. As John said, I'm from Chile, and Chile is first and foremost a very far, far away land. And I grew up in Chile in the 80s. And that meant I was really growing up in a little island that was away from the world. And we had questions, but we didn't have answers. And there were tales. There were tales of wonderful explorers and naturalists that had come to our lands, like Humboldt and Shackleton and Darwin and Fitzroy and the Voyage of the Beagle. And I was lucky enough to be part of family that we were, going out a lot and climbing mountains and watching nature. So I think unwittingly, because of course when you're a child you think it's all very silly and your parents are very annoying and it's very hot and why can't I be going to parties like normal kids, right? That's much more fun. But I think in time what came together was that nature, observing nature by really being in it, has so much to tell you. So that is just a drawing of Magellan's expedition, because in October this year it will be the 500th anniversary of, which I think is an anniversary is very important for this society, the first time that the Earth becomes empirically one. Magellan's circumnavigation of the Earth really means that out of empirical questioning and theory, then you go testing and you go, oh yeah, guess what? It's true, You sail and then you come back. So it works. Bitches, like Richard Dawkins says. It works. So Magellan's anniversary, which is coming up, and of course, for me as a Chilean, it's very meaningful as a scientist as well, because of course he goes through Magellan Strait and sees this territory for the first place. But funnily enough, this year is also another anniversary which is less known, which is May 1820 was the first time that the HMS Beagle sailed in the Thames. And of course that's way earlier, the actual voyage of the Beagle that took Darwin, but it was just the story of the ship herself. And I just want to mention that because it's a pet love of mine. That photo I took 2 years ago from the only one-to-one replica in the world that exists of HMS Beagle, and it's now you are looking at Magellan Strait. So the point of this is just that the voyages of discoveries can be incredibly important in discovery itself, but also in a kind of uniting our field of knowledge. Because these are literary voyages, they are scientific voyages, these are voyages of discovery that they require the best that we have of us humans. In particular, I was very inspired, obviously, by the Voyage of the Beagle. This is a slide that shows the actual voyage. And as a Chilean, I was trained in Cambridge, Oxford, and London, and obviously people that, so all things Darwin, you know, like all the Darwin paraphernalia you might ever want, like Down House and so on. But even then, people would go like, oh yeah, the voyage, Galapagos, was very important, you know, the finches. I'm like, yeah, the finches. Those finches, the different beaks, you know? So they adapt, and you're like, yeah, Darwin, of course, was in Galapagos, but the finches were collected by Fitzroy assistants, and they were later classified by Gould in London. My deformation is that when you actually study the voyage of the Beagle, you realize that Darwin spent a lot more time in Chile and Argentina, in the southern bit of South America, than anywhere else. And not only the time that he spent there, but also the experiences that he lived. So he lived through an earthquake. Just how many people here have lived through an earthquake? Yeah, okay. Yeah, you should. It doesn't count. So if you ever think that Earth doesn't change, right? And then you live through an earthquake, you go like, oh, okay. Suddenly, right, you are willing to go like, this thing can change pretty quickly. So that, for instance, happened when Darwin arrived to Valparaiso. He had been reading Lyell's, his mentor, his geology mentor's book. Lyell gave the Earth a date, basically deep time. The concept of deep time was Lyell's contribution. Without deep time, you cannot have evolution, obviously. You know, if the Earth has only 6,000 years, you're like, yeah, there isn't much time to do stuff, right? It's like, first of all, give me time so I can experiment with this. But Lyell believed in that Earth, like the morphometry of Earth could change, but not organisms yet. And then Darwin receives another tome of Lyell and arrives to Valparaiso, and then they go south to Cape Horn, and then he stops, and there's like a huge earthquake. And he experiences this earthquake in southern Chile. And not only he lives through like the earth literally changing, but also there was a tsunami. So the notion suddenly, like he goes like, if Earth can change like this, how could organisms not adapt accordingly? So, and again, he lives through different experiences. Like, of course, they were also bringing the Fuegians back to Patagonia. The first voyage of the Beagle, they had picked up 4 Fuegians individuals. So he was like just getting used. But my point is that like Darwin experiences in South and South America were very important to him. And I was very impressed and inspired by this. That's just a drawing made by the photographer of the Beagle. Of course, you didn't have photographs there, but you had people that could do. Yes, exactly. And that's the just below the photograph is the current. If you go to Punta Arenas, you can go, and for like $5 or something, you can go on the on the HMS Beagle replica, which is done really beautifully. Anyway, so that really makes you think about this voyage. That's the picture that I took. That picture from the cabin. That is what Darwin would have seen every day waking up. There are things that impress you, like this. It's a very small ship that had many people. Living conditions were very hard, and Darwin was an awful sailor. He got seasick. He hated being on board, which was great for us. Because it meant that he wanted to be, on foot or horseback, exploring as much as possible. So again, this thing of like the interaction with nature and gleaning knowledge of that. Anyway, because of my experience as a child, like in Patagonia and in Chile, and reading about these voyages, eventually, as we all know, stories are most important. So this story came to my hands. It's a novelized account that I really recommend if you guys are interested, about the voyage of the Beagle, told from Fitzroy perspective. So it's called This Thing of Darkness. This Thing of Darkness is a line from Shakespeare in The Tempest. This thing of darkness, I acknowledge mine. It is the voyage, but it goes to kind of Fitzroy relationship with darkness, how difficult it was for him to be the captain of the Beagle, how difficult it was for him to come to terms with human nature, at the time, of course, the slavery question was, very much alive. Darwin and Fitzroy had important differences. But the point is that in reading this book, I was kind of very inspired of taking like my own voyage of discovery, and these voyages that combine geographical discovery, but also obviously they're asking a question about human nature. So, like all voyages, they take always much longer than you think. Right? It's like the Odyssey. Oh yeah, you go. It takes way longer, many dangers. Eventually, you come back home, but it really takes a long time. So I will tell you, kind of my voyage in a structure that is mirroring the structure of the book that I'm writing at the moment. And the reason I want to do that is actually I think very important to the communication of the science itself, is because I first wrote the book which was like the findings. And then I picked up the book, and I think it was an okay book. It was like in terms of like science. But it bothered me. I don't know if it was boring or not, but I just felt that it was dishonest, in the sense that I thought, first and foremost, these things, or at least for me, were guided by curiosity. And curiosity, that's why it didn't matter so much whether it was science specifically or not. It was just like a voyage driven by curiosity. So then I just did it again. And that's the story. So that's the story arc that I'm going to tell you now, which I use classic rock songs to mark the goalpost, because when you're on your own, you have to listen to something. And classic rock is both energizing and has great lyrics. So basically, I just started with like, people are strange, right? This is a song from The Doors, obviously. It goes like, people are strange when you're a stranger. It means, the question is that humans are weird, right? Like, we are like weird primates, exactly. So it's like, now, what are you going to do about it? And because humans are strange, people are strange, you need to study them. So my basic insight was really not more than that. That humans are weird and we need to study them. So that's really what drove the question. And I think it was also because humans are weird, we need to come out of ourselves. It can't just be us looking at our own navel. So this video here shows I'm following the bonobos. This is like about 150 kilometers south of the river Congo. This is a community of about 30 wild bonobos. They're traveling at their pace, as you can see. And there's a lot of this, but that's the main point. Like, you try to put yourself literally in the feet of something else than you, in order to try to arrive at the question of why are humans so weird. And then you start to observe weird things in other animals too, which beg the question of how weird are we really. For example, you see there's a line of bonobos, and there's a guy in the middle which is spinning, right? You see him like doing like this. So why is he doing that? What is he doing?
He's bored.
Right? What?
He's bored.
Yeah, he's bored. And well, they're traveling with a purpose. They're looking for a fruiting tree. So it's like traveling for work, as if it were. But he's playing.
Okay. And you see them having sex with each other? Always having
Oh yeah, I will show you that too. Don't worry. Yes, that's coming. Don't worry. It's like, God, all this exploration stuff. Like.
Weren't you worried about the Me Too case?
Oh, I was worried about so many things. Yes. Yes. No, there are many worries, and I should have been worried about more things, I think. But anyway, these guys play, and that makes you ask, obviously, many things, because, isn't that wasteful? Isn't that like pointless? Why is he doing that? If you're like an adult, responsible animal in the wild, you have to travel, you have to find food, you have to work, so to say. So do animals feel joy like we do? Do they waste time? Do they have leisure time? Do they have creative time? All these questions suddenly that we are so familiar in the arts and science and start to come to fore. So when you have female mammals hanging out with each other, basically, if you're a female mammal, you go like, well, to have my kid killed is a bad thing, right? And so you want to avoid having your kid killed. And if you live in a complex society, in order to have your kid not killed, basically the best thing you can do is create a society in which aggression is lessened. So it's kind of, if you were like to give grandmothers the vote, they would go like, seriously guys, like take your fights to another level because they're silly and they will kill our kids. So it is as if female bonobos, they got the upper hand and they really dislike extreme violence. So they do a combination of strategies to reduce male violence. And this is in stark contrast to chimpanzees. So this is a photo that is published in a Nature magazine paper that reviewed the consequences and the context of violence in chimpanzees. So chimpanzees, they're said to have proto-wars. They do something very similar to what you would recognize like war activity in hunter-gatherers, namely the males get together, they patrol the borders of the territory, they shut up. It's very different behavior. If they encounter individuals of other communities and if they have superiority in numbers, they will go and attack them, kill them, many times also tear their genitals apart. So, you have infanticide and you have homicide in chimps. So this happens, it's part of the repertoire. It's probably not human-induced. This is what chimps do, and it's very different to what bonobos do. So the obvious question is, which heritage do we have? And it is obvious that we kind of have both. Yeah. And how plastic are these things? What are the conditions that move a society in one direction or the other? And that's what made me want to go and take a walk in the wild side. This is a song by Lou Reed. The walk in the wild side means a literal walk in the wild side. So you mentioned, John, walking 3,000 kilometers in Congo, and that's what I did. But I think it also meant, I think as secular humanists you sympathize, a walk in the wild side in the sense of like an intellectual wild side, like really how far can we take these questions? What this photo shows is, well, the red dot is the field site. Wamba, as John mentioned, that's the oldest bonobo research site in the world. It was founded by Japanese researchers in the mid-70s. Yes, you have a question?
Yeah, just in reference to the question that you were just asking about to what extent can we compare ourselves to bonobos or chimpanzees. I think it's a key fact to keep in mind is that we are not descended from either of those species.
Exactly.
We are descended from a common ancestor,
Exactly.
but they are different species than ours.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's why we specify that we are cousins. They're not your parent. That's why you kind of piece it together. Yeah. And so just so you have a sense of how this looks, to get to the field site, it's a long journey. On the left, you see small tributaries of the Congo River. And on the right, you see that's what like human habitation looks when you're in Congo. These are old roads that were made by Belgians. Because Congo had its independence from Belgium in 1960, most of the road network is gone. So you don't have much vehicles, but you can basically you fly in a small Cessna and you land in an open airstrip. So I think I have, oh yeah, there you go. That's the airport. So this is a landing strip which is about 60 miles from the research station. Obviously, you know, arranging flights and all of that, it's an adventure in itself. Here, there's the time that National Geographic send a flight, so you can like get there maybe a few times a year. And partly the reason I'm showing you like how to get there is tricky is because part of the reason we know so little about bonobos is just that the logistics of studying them have been very challenging. The question is, why did they evolve such different societies? So at the moment, we don't have a definite answer, but it's probably a combination of three things. One, that you have a starting grade A population, and the formation of the river Congo means you have isolation. So there's a population that is in the north and one in the south. They have different ecologies. One has more fruit than the other. The point of having more fruit is that females can hang out together if there's enough food. If you don't have enough food, females cannot hang out together. If females cannot hang out together, it means that females cannot like have their way. If you're a female mammal and you have your way, you go like, I don't like violence. So the ecological conditions were very important because it doesn't mean that they predicted, it means that it allows for that to happen. Then you add 2 million years, and then you have cultural dynamics too. And so the separation plus time probably means the difference. So yeah, it's difficult to get there. You have, broken bridges, and then you get through a bridge that works and you're very happy. And then the night falls, and sometimes your gear falls in the river. So all of these things happen. Eventually the motorcycle works and you get to the research site and you're even happier. So this is how the research site looks. It's basically a clearing in the forest. And the photo there shows the Japanese researcher with the local men that we go together to the forest. They are the experts. They know the forest extremely well. And so we go every day with them. They can read the forest like I think I will never be able to. And this science, in a way, is very old school science because it's ethology, it's observation. You use your eyes and binoculars and pen and paper. So we don't do interventions. You are not doing experiments on them. You're observing. So you asked he made a point about the whole family tree issue, and I mentioned it, but I want to mention it again. Basically what we are trying to do here is like what you do when you become interested about yourself and you go, oh, I'm going to do some research on where I come from and my grandparents. And we all get to that age, right, when you do like family genealogy. And we do, and then you go like, oh, I didn't know. On my mother's side of the family, we have like all these like artist cousins. So that might explain something, right? And on my dad's side of the family, they are kind of rather squared. And this is the same, but adding several zeros in time. Because basically we do family trees, but with species. And this is our family tree of the apes that are alive today. So there are many other family members that we do not see. They are extinct, like Homo erectus and Australopithecines and Neanderthals. And the fact that they are extinct gives us the illusion that difference is much greater. Imagine that we had 5 species of human living at the same time. Hobbits and Neanderthals and humans and Denisovans. And exactly, there you go. So how crazy is that, right? And then if you put one here, you have a huge illusion of difference. But if you fill in with the whole gradient, you go like, oh yeah, there are similarities and there are differences. So one of the issues that happens today with extinct, that means like apes that are living is that a lot of the living forms that are in between are dead, are extinct. So the illusion of difference is much greater. But that's why we study the guys that are alive. Well, it's the only thing we got, basically. And we can try to piece it together like a big jigsaw puzzle, basically. This is Gauche, one of the males that I followed. As you can see, he's a very beautiful animal, and he's a very strong, powerful male too. These animals are female-led and they're female-dominated, but it doesn't mean that males are kind of like puny, peripheral, these are very beautiful males, and females have selected males that are tolerant and that are more playful. So, kind of females have selected the kind of male they like, and it seems to work very well for them, I think. This is a picture that shows what your typical leisure time of bonobos is. For bonobos, social life is very important. They are social animals like we are. So an animal will not only take time to eat and rest and digest. An animal takes time to have a social life. And that takes part of the time budget. Like we take time to be here and eat together, because that is also one of our needs. Social life is important to them like it is for us. But social life also brings challenges. You live under pressure when you live in societies, and that is normal for all animals that live in societies. Whether you are a bat or you are a bonobo or a human being, living in societies means that there's conflict. There's conflict at all levels, and animals are constantly, trying to deal and, with that conflict in different ways. That's kind of the bonobo story. When you research this, you're also under pressure. This is a photo. I'm trying to cross a swamp. Swamps are annoying because they have more spikes and ants that are kind of, and mosquitoes are everywhere. But snakes, there'd be like swimming snakes. That's a Congo viper there. I don't know if you see on the left, you can just see the hair shape. You have kind of very significant encounters with wildlife when you're doing this research. Maybe I shouldn't be showing this picture at dinner time, but there you go. It's part of research. And I have to mention, I was telling you the story of the book that narrated the story of the journey of the Beagle, and This Thing of Darkness. And This Thing of Darkness, refers to, of course, human psyche darkness, but also Congo itself. It's in the imagination and in literature. It's Joseph Conrad's the heart of darkness, and that means Joseph Conrad did not just write a novella. Joseph Conrad wrote a story about what he saw when he went to Congo as a young captain. Congo has a very, very dark history of violence. That part of it, what Conrad was writing about, was during Leopold's time. The first large genocide that we have in modernity is really in Congo, the beginning of the 1800s and the early 1900s. So Congo had about 20 million people, of which half of the population died, 10 million people.
That was starting in 1884.
Say again?
Started in 1884
Yes.
when King Leopold
Exactly.
So-called Congo Free State.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And he convinced the Western world that the Congo Free State was charity work, but of course, it also.
Slavery to get the ivory and
yes. First was ivory, and then. Oh, sorry, I just forgot the rubber. Thank you. Because rubber, it takes a long time. It's a vine that takes a long time to recover. So basically, you need a workforce. Leopold established
get scandal came up in 1908, and that's when the Belgian Parliament decided to make a colony of it.
Yes. But first, it was personal property, it was not the Belgian colonization. Congo was personal property of King Leopold himself. So, I mean, that story, it's just an incredible window into like spin doctoring and all sorts of things that are familiar to us today. No, it's good. Anyway, Heart of Darkness, many things happen. Like, well, you get bitten by animals. I was then attacked by poisonous wasps. So they leave you, blind for a few days. Yeah. So that's not very fun. Or you find snakes in your room, but then really the darkest bit is when you are confronted with the story that what happened there. These are photographs of the time of Leopold. What you see is people with their hands cut. These are the people who were not able to fulfill the rubber quota. So there were quotas, you were meant to bring enough rubber, but rubber is collected from a vine that takes a time to replenish. So of course, the higher the quotas, the longer the time, and people had to go further into a forest. So there are these accounts of like the rivers full of hands, a blood river, Congo River being. So yeah. So the point that I'm trying to make here is that when you read the literature of the time and the story, and you can't but be confronted with human nature, and it's kind of the darkest side of human nature, and it becomes like almost like a ridiculous contrast when you're waking up and then going to watch these guys, and you go, if there were a God and a God had a sense of irony, I think he would have done exactly this. He would have put bonobos in the heart of darkness, because you're like, otherwise, bonobos are so nice and they show you what the best of a society can be, and why don't they live in the Caribbean? It's like, no, they have to live in Congo, because in case we were not aware of the contrast. So yeah, I just, in terms of asking yourself, the question of human nature is very unavoidable in a place like Congo. And then, of course, I'm studying play behavior. So, I want to rock. These animals wanted to play as we play. And this is very interesting question, I think, and the, human, scientific, and artistic level plays at the heart of creativity in all human endeavors. So, and of course, of joy. We see that not only bonobos play, but other mammals and birds play too. The little parrots and maybe some reptiles. We don't know.
Do they have any natural predators?
Yes, they do. They have big cats are natural predators. The density of cats has gone down because of humans, so they would eat baby bonobos. Sometimes they're attacked by wild boar and sometimes snakes, but big cats would be the biggest.
Do they have a response to natural predators?
Yeah. So they have vocalizations that are fear vocalizations. So for example, if humans come with hunting dogs, they vocalize, everyone goes up to the trees. Or if they see a green mamba, I saw this several times, they're super scared of green mambas for good reasons.
That's a snake.
Yeah, it's a very poisonous snake.
But there's no is there a physical attack against predators?
Mobbing, I didn't see it, but in chimpanzees it's been observed that even to the point that in one case chimpanzees took the baby of a jaguar and killed them. And so amongst primatologists it's debated as did they know this baby would grow up to be a predator, or was it? But you see mobbing a lot. So I'll just show you a few videos of just how bonobo life looks like. This is a type of game that you can observe in bonobos in the wild. I call them trust games. They're part of like a cluster of different games in which you have a combination of voluntary risk-taking, enjoyment, and vulnerability. So it is as if like building trust requires like some degree of real risk, but the real risk is in a context of relative safety. So for example here, what you see is an adult will grab, can I just do this? Like, you know, in Cliffhanger, the film, there's that scene like that, right? No, they don't do that. Basically, I am the adult, and I grab the little guy, and then I swing them, which means that I have the power, and I can let them go, and they would fall, you know, 5, 10, 15 meters away. But for the little guy there, you can see, they think it's super fun. For them, it's like, whoa, this is super fun. And so it's like, at first it's fun to see, and then you go like, why is it fun? Like, why would it be fun for you to take a risk, right? And of course then you get thinking, and I'm sure you're all thinking now in your own lives, in which context we take risks. Then we think like, yay, I want to do this. It's a game, yeah. And then you need to know with whom and when to do it, but it happens in many different contexts. And I don't know if I have let me see if I have the video here. Oh yeah, and perhaps the most salient context is one where there's a male, and okay, I need to ask, what is the most vulnerable part of the male anatomy? There's murmurs. The ego. No, testicles. Of course, testicles, right? So the reason, you know, as a primatologist, we're very used to talk about testicles and different body parts. But so when I observed the game I'm going to show you, I was very surprised because it's basically a game in which, whether it's a male or a female, the fun part is that they're holding a male's testicles, but the male wants. And let me show you the video first. Like, I don't know if it's clear enough, but the male is in front, and there's a female. You see, she kind of is holding his testicles, and they do like a kind of ring around the rosy. Okay? You can see, right? Yeah. There you go.
Is this a porn film?
He wants to do it. That's for sure. It's not coercive. There you go.
That's cool.
It's fun. This is so. You can ask, you know, tell me how you play, and I'll tell you who you are, right?
What sort of
Is that activity sexual? Is it foreplay, or is it just play?
This is play.
Just play.
This is play. Yeah. It is a very good question, because for bonobos are so sexual that you can ask what is, but at least in this case it doesn't lead to intercourse. They have a lot of play that has sexual elements, like say we have jokes which have sexual elements. So I think that would be perhaps like a comparison. So the point of this is that the first time you see it, it's like, oh my God, it's funny. But then it really, you have to ask this question of why are they doing this? You know, if it's obviously something that it's a risk. But I think what it's interesting to notice is that at the core of bonobo society is social tolerance. And so here what you see is a big male. His name is Nobita. So he's grooming a baby who's around a year of age. The mother of the baby is behind you. You see there's a boob. There's a breast. Yeah, so that breast belongs to the mother. The mother is 41 years old, and this is her 4th child. So that just also shows you that these are animals that have long lives, they have long reproductive careers, and she's also the boss of the group. So, you know, she's like, female bonobos, they go up in hierarchy as they age. So for a female, the older you are, the higher you are in hierarchy in general. So it also shows you these are not the only animals who thought that females could work and have babies. at the same time. So, yeah, but so see, this is kind of like bonobo social time. They're very tolerant. You know, they have a kind of good life. Yes.
To what extent is the raising of the young family-oriented, and to what extent is it communal?
The families are substructures that are embedded in communities. So these communities are around 30 individuals, and by a family, I mean a female and their offspring, because females will emigrate when they reach adolescence. So they don't have like a mom and a dad in that sense. That's the same guy I was showing you in the grooming session when he was a bit younger. I love that photo. He just kind of like, it's like the epitome of surprise. It's like, whoa. So they have this sense of fun and curiosity, which is really interesting to observe. John mentioned that I observed several days and weeks of peaceful intergroup encounters. This was, as a scientist, the most interesting thing to watch because, you know, chimpanzees are famous for their proto-wars. So when you're following these animals and you find that instead, when they meet a different community, you know, do you kill the other or do you interact with the other in some sense? And bonobos do not kill the other, but this is also true with other communities. So at the height of the fruit season, the community goes and crosses the river and goes to visit, so to say, the neighbors. And it's not that it's lacking in conflict. There is conflict. You know, at the beginning it's very tense, but the conflict is regulated and there's a myriad of different social interactions. So there are some fights, there are displays of power. The males do a lot of displays of power, but there's also sex and play and grooming and just co-feeding. So these are starting to look more like proto-festivals, if you know what I mean, like long interactions of different communities that go over days and days and days around the time where fruit is abandoned. So it looks very similar, I think, to what we have done in the past. Let me show you. This is just how some. Is it working? Yes. These are just some footage of how play looks like. You have a question?
Oh yeah. Do bonobos and chimpanzees ever interact?
No, because of the river. Not in the wild, yeah. The Congo River is like an enormous moving lake. And the chimps live north and bonobos live south.
And you have to ask question. It's a normal biology that
Yes.
the brains of the...
That's a great question. So there is like early evidence on that, like the genetics have been done, and there's a lot of similarity, but there are some differences, for example, in dopamine, in endorphin production. Well, the jury's still out, but it points out towards like bonobos really being kind of hypersocial. Yeah.
Sort of piggybacking off that last question.
Yeah.
Have bonobos ever demonstrated friendship with any other species?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, in the wild, there are accounts of bonobos playing with monkeys, other species. In captivity, there are several accounts of bonobos being very gentle towards other species. So there is that question of like their gentleness, so to say. Yeah.
So the Darwin feature here is to some extent the separation of chimpanzees and bonobos,
Yes.
and the direction in which both the are going because of adaptability to their surroundings and what they eat and how they interact. So in a sense, the DarwinDay question is, okay, so bring in Darwin.
Yeah. Right, sorry. No, I should make it more explicit. So Darwin has a wonderful quote well, among so many, in which he says, the day will come in which baboon metaphysics will be more important than Locke. Right? So, up for debate, but I think this is the Darwin question. These are not baboons, but these are bonobo metaphysics. So I think the Darwin question is that to what degree what we can glean from other animals, such as baboons or bonobos, like bonobo metaphysics, are becoming more important than Locke. Not to, of course, but Locke did not know neuroscience or primatology the way that we are now being able to know. So this is the human nature question. I think the general findings are all along what Darwin's intuitions were, i.e. that there are differences in degree, not in kind. And that's why I'm trying to show the play story more specifically, because it's a good example of differences in degree, not in kind. We were told that only humans have complex emotions such as joy and love and grief and creativity. Animals can have fear and anger and look for food. But what about these other things that are like the foundations of something that like aesthetics, taking joy in the creation of something, etc. So to the Darwin question, that's why I'm trying to show you the play story. Yes.
Do bonobos live totally in the present?
That's a great question. Probably no, actually. Another of the big philosophical discussions was that humans, we have the capacity to mental time travel, and animals, I think David Hume said it, animals are locked in time. They're prisoners of the present, which is funny because the mindfulness people want to make us want to go there. but there's very good early evidence, for example, in corvids, in crows, that at the very least crows, we know that they can time travel. Namely, not only that they have memories and that they learn from the past, but also that they have that thing that we're doing now. Okay, is it going to be 10 p.m.? Will I get my train? The planning for the future and changing your behavior according to what you think will happen in the future is called mental time travel. We don't have good data from wild bonobos. The data at the moment is coming from experiments in corvids, birds from the crow family. I have no reason to believe that there's any different. These are kind of the same type of animal, long-lived, complex societies, big brains, big neocortex to brain ratio. It's the same kind of niche. Yeah.
Memory is one thing.
Yeah.
But imagining the future is not just
For sure.
It's not just a neurological reaction to an upsetting memory.
Yeah.
I mean, if they were to put aside food for tomorrow, that would be an indication of the future.
Exactly. That's why I'm mentioning the example of the crows. Because in crows, you can, because crow cache, they hide food, you can actually study this in very good detail. If you're interested, I said go to Mattingly Behavior Department in Cambridge. That's when they're doing this type of research. And what they find is exactly what you're saying, that in anticipation of the future, they change their behavior according to what food I expect or not to find. So kind of mental time travel. I think when you contrast bonobos and chimps, what you kind of are reminded of is the kind of, you have proto-wars and proto-festivals. And so then I also did some field research in humans, looking at what humans do in festivals. I think it's very interesting because we were talking about rituals and rituals that bring people together. So of course things like, music making and food sharing and alcohol. We are here in Pete's Tavern. Sharing alcohol. It's a human ritual that brings people together. So thinking about why and how play brings societies together, I started to look at these kind of human rituals that are, social technologies, if you want, we were talking about, why is it that religions are so good at co-opting these rituals, and therefore they work, because they work. They bring humans together. And of course, as secular humanists, one of the things that we still have to do is learn how to create secular rituals. These are not rituals that, religion invented. Everything that I'm trying to tell you is that these are very old elements that come down in the primate line, and that humans have been doing it for way, way longer. That I think we had like a guy with a white beard in the sky. So it's kind of up to us, I think, to what level we understand, and then co-opt this, because they create society. With that, I wanted to finish and open for questions. Thank you. Thank you, John.
So my question is about how you did your work. Were they aware of you, and were you alone, or did you have other people with you?
Yeah.
When you were walking?
They are certainly always aware of you. They're highly intelligent animals.
Come over to you?
Sometimes, but part of the protocol, so that's hard to do.
Right.
But they are very used, because the field site is so old.
Yeah.
The babies have been, what you try to do as an observer is to be invisible,
Right.
and to be very boring, and so that they behave as if they were, and so they go like a weird primate, whatever.
Right.
And I think for the most part we achieve that. I always go to the forest with 2 local people, and sometimes with Japanese researchers.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah. You had a question?
I wanted to ask, I really worry about that there are way more chimpanzees than bonobos.
Yes.
Here we have a peaceful prototype, a peaceful clan,
Yes.
and we have chimpanzees who are far more numerous. So is it the case that that river weren't there, the more aggressive chimpanzees would come and decimate bonobos just as we do on, or with more peaceful societies, with the stronger primates that are running them, like the president, for instance, or whatever. So I'm wondering about the numbers and the scarcity of bonobos
Yes.
compared to primates.
That is a wonderful question. I think the numbers are an evolutionary contingency. There's just less of this habitat in that area, and because chimps were left north of the river, they have a distribution that is much wider, and so they exist. There are just many more of them. That's good, that's bad. Why would they happen? I think the role of contingency and luck here has been huge.
Do you think they would come in though?
If bonobos would disappear, they probably, my guess is that there will be a lot of mating with, the genetics suggest that there has been some interbreeding in the events in the past.
Right.
So, you also have, like chimp populations that are on the kind of bonobo side, females that have stronger links, animals that are less aggressive. These are not black and white. There is a degree of continuity.
Oh, good. There's a continuum.
Not exactly, but there are chimps. Also depends on their ecology, whether they live in places that are more scarce or not. So, yes.
The difference in tool making.
Yes, so that's a very famous difference. Chimpanzees are known like the tech guys. Chimpanzees are, not only they're Machiavellian and brilliant politicians, but also they're definitely more techie than bonobos. Many people say, like, if bonobos are too intelligent, why don't they use tools? They can, because in captivity they clearly have the cognitive capacity. In the wild, they just don't do it very much. Once in a while, they will like use a big leaf and use it as an umbrella, but chimps are much more technological.
Are their diets similar?
Chimpanzee diet is broader and it has more protein.
Chimps will eat meat.
Yeah, they eat meat and they hunt much more.
So bonobos don't hunt.
Depends in which site. In the sites that I work, they hunt, it's very specific, they hunt flying squirrels, but only like a few times a year. Flying squirrels. I don't know why. They love flying squirrels. But in other sites, they hunt more.
So if you think it's the sexual selection of the female that makes us a more peaceful society,
Yeah.
is it also true that sexual selection could lead to a more violent society?
For sure.
Is that the response? Is that why chimpanzees are more violent? Is that why humans are more violent?
Sexual selection is neither good or bad. Sexual selection will just take in any direction. The difference is that when sexual selection is led by female preference, if you're a mammal, it tends to reduce aggression. Because if you think from the point of view of a female, your investment in a child, it's very large. So it's a very bad idea to lose a child because of infanticide. So if you give females the upper hand, right, you go like, no, we don't want our kids killed or injured. So that's why, when possible, females will have that effect. But that's why it's probable that in chimpanzees, it's like kind of the males have the upper hand, because females can't hang out together. So, yeah.
So can you tell me what about ecotourism?
No,
So I know
not in Congo.
I saw a little
Not in
bit
Congo.
of a blog about ecotourism on your website. So
Oh, what I do?
yeah,
Oh, but that's not in Congo. Yeah. No, there isn't tourism in Congo.
ecotourism.
No. I like to go different places, and I've done expeditions in Patagonia and other places, but Congo doesn't have a tourism industry. Yeah. It's better to go to Tanzania.
Now, some chimpanzees have bare butts, big bare butts.
Yes.
Is that, I used to think it was because of concrete cages and sitting rubbing the hair, but sometimes in the wild they have that too, don't they?
Like in terms of not having hair?
The buttocks and
Yes.
And I'm just wondering, is it
Yeah.
sitting when they sit because they use their hands or what?
What you're seeing, it's more often that they're bare in captivity because they have over-grooming. So for instance, the photos, look, like that photo there, can you see the arms of that female? They're pretty bare. Yeah. They're very different from the photos that I showed you, in which they're full hair. So it's typical from captivity that you are more bare. It's like over-grooming, and so that's, I mean, not that you cannot in the wild, but as a norm, you'd say the barebacks are more.
What's a big and bare? Yeah.
Yes, yeah, I mean age, obviously.
And bonobos have very large
Have very large what? Oh yeah, both bonobos and chimpanzees have very large testicles. So, because of sperm competition. Yes.
chimps also?
Oh yeah. Yeah, because they both have multi-male, multi-female systems. So that kind of tends to impact the relative size of testes to body size.
Isabel, there's a question in the back. I think the man's going to explode if you don't answer.
Okay, sorry.
I had a question with regards to comparing bonobos and chimpanzees.
Okay.
Would you say that with chimpanzees there's a much stronger element of tribalism?
No, I wouldn't. Depending, what do you mean?
Tribalism,
Yes.
being part of a tribe.
Sure. I mean, if I would say that chimpanzees have higher tribalism, I think I see where you're going. Chimpanzees are more strict in their tribe, perhaps is what I would say.
That's what I was just referring
Yes,
to, basically.
okay, yeah. For example, I'll give you an example. For male chimpanzees, they would be very rare to accept new males coming into their tribe. They would probably kill them, okay? Bonobos are more relaxed, and we have examples of new males coming in to their tribe already as adults, and they're being accepted and included as part of the community.
So there's more tribalism with chimpanzees than there is with bonobos?
I don't know if I would call it more, but that they are more strict or less tolerant. Because it's not that they don't know who their tribe is. Yes, okay. Yeah.
With an ISN.
Oh, okay, yes, okay. Yeah, you have a question.
What happened from what I'm got?
It's very difficult to see them in the wild. I saw one case.
What happens with the rest of the
Yeah. So often we can never see it. We're just not there. So we don't know. But we have examples from captivity. So there's attention. When the babies die, there's a kind of mourning from the females. They can drag.
I'm not talking about like adults.
Everyone comes and there's vocalizations, there's attention, but to see it in the wild is super rare. You just don't. Yeah, no, like, yeah. Thank you very much.
For a round of applause.
Thank you for the questions. They were great questions. Yes.
Wonderful, but I want you to sit and relax. And
No, thank you. This has been wonderful. I hope it was okay.
oh, it was fantastic.